So we're in an environment where monetary authorities are trying to tighten and clamp down on inflation, but you have these governments with very large debt to GDP ratios, very large deficits in many cases, especially the United States. And those are very hard to support when you don't have central bank support. And so I think we're kind of entering back in autumn of 2022, we entered a kind of a spike for a period of time. That's when the UK gilt market broke. We also saw that the US Treasury market was getting wobbly. The yen was getting in trouble, and we're kind of seeing a lot of those similar things pop up again.
Financial expert Lyn Alden delves into the current economic landscape, exploring the delicate balance between tightening monetary policies and soaring inflation. She highlights the challenges faced by governments, particularly the United States, with substantial debts and deficits. Alden discusses the recent market fluctuations, pointing out key moments like the UK gilt market breaking and the US Treasury market becoming unstable. She emphasizes the significance of both the speed and level of change in financial markets, stressing the importance of supply-demand dynamics and liquidity issues. Alden identifies the Treasury market as a critical indicator, suggesting that any disturbances there could lead to Federal Reserve intervention. As she navigates through these complexities, she provides crucial insights for investors. Stay tuned until the end to uncover the specific signs Alden suggests we watch for, hinting at potential market shifts that could have significant implications for various sectors.
And so I think we're gonna have to watch in the coming weeks. This is kind of the phase where it goes from a orderly decline, which was happening in the recent weeks and months, and now we're potentially looking at a little bit more disorder and intervention in the market. So I think the long term outcome here, like the end game, is basically some degree of yield management while you have inflation still being a either recurring problem or an ongoing problem. But I think that the path dependent to get there is obviously challenging, and that's kind of what we're going through now. So two things matter, both the levels and the speed at which those levels change, because if things change gradually, it gives entities time to adjust. And that's also, I think, why we're seeing things break at a different level here than they broke at the kind of a similar time of year last year, is that, balance sheets have had another year of seeing this coming, or, capital accumulation, things like that. So it's both the level and the speed. It's also going to depend on what's happening with, for example, you can have higher rates if the Fed is not also selling their supply into the market. So it's not just necessarily a rate problem. It's not necessarily that entities are looking at this and saying these yields aren't acceptable. It's they're saying these yields are acceptable, but we don't have the balance sheet capacity to absorb this rate of new supply. And so it's less about rates themselves, although that's a big factor. It's about the speed of change, and it's about the overall supply demand characteristics. And then these liquidity things can trickle through into other markets. So, for example, if it gets disorderly, part of why it's part of an indicator that it's been orderly so far is it's not really affected the large cap equity market. But we start to see, and I think we're seeing potentially early signs of disruption in the equity market. That's when the disorder starts taking over, because you can get forced selling of other assets. So I think these are at levels where we should look around and start wondering which kind of smaller banks might be running into trouble again. We should look around and see, commercial real estate exposures, all those kind of recurring trouble spots. These levels are now a lot more threatening to them than they were, even several months ago. So I think a key thing to watch is the move index and overall treasury liquidity conditions, because the one market that they won't let break is the treasury market at least for very long, or anything adjacent to it. So, for example, back in 2019, it was the repo rate that broke, but that was a funding source for treasuries. So it was like an adjacent market to treasuries.
Mhm.
If you should see either the treasury market or something very adjacent to a break, I think that's where you would have some degree of Federal Reserve intervention. And part of why they intervened back in March of this year was that, one of the release valves when these banks have troubles is they would have to potentially sell a lot of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities in the market and cause that type of liquidity problem. And so in September of last year, when you started to have like sovereign bond issues, it was the Treasury that more or less intervened. And then when you had the banking crisis early this year, you had the Federal Reserve intervene. And, I don't think they're going to intervene based on the stock market going down, 5, 10, 20%. That's not something they're going to look at. They're not really going to intervene if you have one rogue bank failure or large commercial property, have a problem. They're going to intervene, I think, only when you get to the point where the key markets that they really can't let break, like the treasury market, should have a problem. So I think that's the thing to watch. And until you see signs of that um, getting disorderly, you should assume that they're watching this, that they're looking at potentially pausing, they're looking at changing their language, but that there's no real reason for them to directly intervene, especially because they already have facilities out there
Yep.
that can be used to take some of the edge off.
In this next segment, Lyn Alden provides a deep dive into the intricacies of the current economic scenario. Alden discusses the challenges faced by central banks, particularly the Federal Reserve, amidst rising inflation and substantial debts. She compares the present situation to the 2019 repo spike, highlighting the complexities of balancing fiscal stability. Alden points out the shift from T-bill oversupply to coupon oversupply, making it harder for central banks to expand their balance sheets without impacting market dynamics. She explores potential tools the Fed might employ, including temporary liquidity programs and foreign partnerships. Alden suggests that maintaining credibility while addressing liquidity issues is crucial, emphasizing the delicate balance between intervention and credibility. The end game, she argues, could involve central banks being unable to reduce their balance sheets, leading to challenges in controlling sovereign bond markets.
So if you look back in 2019 during the repo spike, they had to stop decreasing their balance sheet and start increasing their balance sheet. And they didn't want to call it QE because they were focusing entirely on T bills. And back then, in many cases, you had the opposite situation as now, in the sense that there was too much T bill oversupply. Um, and so it was a similar fiscal issue at the end of the day, in my opinion, but it was a different part of the curve.
The short end,
Today,
yeah.
there's no problem at all of T-bill oversupply, and it's really about coupon oversupply. So it would be harder for them to expand their balance sheet by buying coupons and say it's not QA this time around. They wouldn't be able to use the same argument as last time. The other way that they can frame it is to say that they're doing it for financial stability purposes rather than stimulus. But at the end of the day, it's the same functionality, right? It's a pro liquidity movement in the market at a time when they're trying to hold their credibility on inflation. So I think that they'd be reticent to use that tool, although I do think that balance sheet tool is probably something they're going to come to before they come to changing rate levels, because they can hold rates where they are as long as they're willing to provide liquidity if the treasury market becomes illiquid. We could also see the expansion of other temporary programs. Like we saw before. And I agree that they're not quite the same thing as QE. Now they're when they happen, they're pro liquidity in a similar way as QE. They have similar effects as QE, but because those exchanges are inherently temporary, they're not permanently acquiring the
Mhm.
security. There is a fundamental difference between them and the QE. So I think what we have to look for is potentially signs that the Fed would, argue that maybe in addition to holding rates flat, they're going to hold their balance sheet flat for a period of time. You could see that type of, kind of like stepwise intervention where they're not going all out on something expansionary, but they're maybe no longer contributing to the issue. And of course, the other lever that they can pull, not the Fed, but the Treasury, is that they could go back to more short-term issuance. So they still have a very large reverse repo facility of available liquidity that can soak up T-bill issuance. And so right now, T-bills are not the source of the problem. The source of the
Mhm.
problem is these longer dated treasuries, which so far there's not been a lot of appetite for. And then in addition, there's agreements you can have that are more subtle in the sense that you can have foreign entities help you intervene, right? You can basically provide liquidity provisions or deals, backdoor deals with other central banks who can then help you with the sovereign bond market liquidity, at least for a period of time. So there are a number of either direct tools or less direct tools. And I think that they would likely be more reticent to use some of the direct tools, especially because that threatens their core credibility. But I think that's the long term end game is to get stuck in these situations where they're unable to reduce their balance sheet. Inflation is doing, whether or not inflation is kind of stabilizing or whether or not we get another spike of it, that the balance sheet largely becomes outside of their control if they want to have functioning sovereign bond markets.
Thank you for tuning in to this eye-opening analysis. We hope you found this discussion insightful and thought-provoking. Remember, understanding the complexities of the financial landscape is crucial in making informed decisions about your investments. If you appreciated the insights shared in this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We love hearing from our viewers. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay ahead in your financial journey. Until next time, take care and invest wisely.